And now we are live. My name is Paul Lathrop, everybody. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media at the Second Amendment Foundation. This is the recording of the Polite Society podcast for Monday, the 24th of July, 2023. Joining me today on my right, Rob Morse. He is Self-Defense Gun Stories. He is the Slow Facts blog. He is just about everywhere anything comes out on the internet. If you read it, there's a good chance he had a hand in writing it if he didn't write it all himself. Below him, Charlie Cook. Charlie does video and writes sometimes. And as you can see, as I bring Charlie up, I had to give him a hard time about this on Saturday. I have to do it again today. He has recently changed sex to a female and moved to India and converted to whatever religion they have there where they put the dot on their head. Below me, John Richardson. Of course, I can never give John a hard time. It's just not in me. John is only Guns and Money, does a fantastic job of writing there, and we are going to be your team today. Let's see here. John's just too nice to give a hard time to. I'm just,
What does this say about me?
All right.
You didn't run fast enough? I don't know.
These are my friends.
All right. I have got social media hooked up. I want to remind everybody, if you are on Facebook or YouTube channels for the Polite Society podcast, you can comment on those videos, and we'll get your comments up on the air as we go through the show. Like this one, Bird of Michigan, Jesus Wins on YouTube. Usually, almost every broadcast, he says, "Darn it, I'm late to the show," and he gets there about 10 minutes before we're ready to shut it down. He says, "Not today," so. Good. Glad you're on time, man. Let's go ahead and get started, guys. On my end, I think we're ready for Masada Ayub. What do you guys think?
Let's listen to Mass.
Here we go. Intro running in 5, 4, 3.
Hey gang, this is Masada Ayub from the Pro Arms Podcast. I'm here to remind you that our podcast is a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. And I'm going to suggest you do what we do and check out the other podcasts at selfdefenseradio.net.
Treat every firearm as if it's loaded.
Never point a firearm at anything you're not willing to kill or destroy.
Keep your finger off the trigger until you are on target and ready to fire.
Always be sure of your target and what lies beyond it.
Hi, and welcome to the Second Amendment Foundation's Polite Society podcast. We're recording this on Monday, July the 24th, 2023. I'm Paul Lathrop.
I'm Rob Morse, and on tonight's show, we talk about the Fifth Circuit Court affirming the injunction against the ATF's frame and receiver rule.
I'm John Richardson, and we'll talk about the New York Police Department approving fewer permits to own or carry in 2022, despite the Bruin decision.
I'm Charlie Cook, and we'll talk about DGUs from the city of brotherly love. So climb aboard,
strap in,
and hang on.
Episode 670 of the Second Amendment Foundation's Polite Society podcast starts right now. And welcome back. It's Monday night. It's 7 p.m. in the Central Time Zone, a little bit after 7 p.m. It's time for the Polite Society podcast. Before I get into getting to what we've all been up to, I want to get this comment in from one of our other staff members, Carrie Ann, who's part of the Sisters in Arms, a firearm story channel on YouTube. She says, I just got off my Zoom in time to join you. Glad you're here, Carrie Ann, and I hope you can join us on the air sometime soon. I know Mondays are not that great for you, but we've been missing you here. So, Rob, as I usually do, I'm going to start with you, bud. What's been up with you since the last time we saw you on Polite Society?
Well, the obvious and the usual, I was on Bill Frady's Lock and Load radio show. I recorded another episode of Self-Defense Gun Stories. Look, previous weekend, I went to Colorado where I took my 5th Faster class. I got to watch their first Level 4 class. So these are people who've been in at least 3 prior Faster classes. They're in a class, they go a year, they get upgraded, they requalify. They're pretty dialed in. And this was the first time I volunteered to be one of the bad guys. I got to get shot with airsoft. I'm writing about the entire event on my blog. There's a lot to say. John, what's been keeping you busy?
Well, I've been engaging in some amateur gunsmithing.
Ooh.
Fortunately, nothing involving a Dremel tool. Actually, I've watched a number of YouTubes and read a number of forum feeds. I epoxy bedded the scope bases on a couple of rifles. I was even able to get them loose after the epoxy cured. Basically, the bases aren't perfect. The receivers aren't perfect. The closer you can get them to mate so that there's less moving around, hopefully the more accurate you'll be. Charlie?
So I have had a couple classes this past weekend. I've actually been carrying in a different place and a different style than I usually do, so I'm kind of going through the whole, oh my God, can people see that I'm carrying? And being worried. Yeah, being worried and concerned about that. And this past weekend, I did the weekend bullet with Paul and Mike Piwowarski. So that's what's been keeping me busy. Paul, what has been happening with you, man? You got a lot of stuff coming up.
Well, I have spent the entire day today, since about 6 o'clock this morning. As I said earlier, it's just about 7 p.m. now, just a little after. And I've been, since 6 o'clock this morning, I have been working with tech specs and going through inventories and working out everything for the GRPC and AMCON broadcasts that are coming up. And, oh, by the way, after the show goes dark today, I get to take half the studio down, pack it up, and get it ready to go to Detroit, because I do plan on doing a live show Saturday night from Detroit, and maybe some Saturday or some Sunday interviews with some of the ladies that are taking the class there, and maybe some of the instructors that are going to be there. So lots going on with me, and let me get a comment in here real quick that came in as Rob was doing his. CNT Designs and Arms, and I believe Coop said Coop is a teacher in I believe it's a community college there. He says, I really want to take some faster classes. Rob, any insight as to how he can get that done?
Coop, reach out to me on Facebook somehow. We'll talk. We'll talk voice to voice. I'll give you the benefit. Tell you everything I know. That shouldn't take long.
It's because Rob's a fast talker.
Hey, and then CNT also followed up with that I'm going to be doing a live show from Detroit. He says, that will be the best Saturday Night Live that has aired in decades. All right. Let's go ahead, and we're going to jump to our first break. We've got a lot of news, and we've cut down news. Between John and I, cut it down significantly. We've still got a lot to go through. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, our first story is good news out of the Fifth Circuit. We'll talk about that right after we hear from ACLDN. Right back after this.
This portion of the Polite Society podcast is brought to you by the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. If you carry a defensive handgun, you need protection from the aftermath of prosecution. Even if you do everything right, you can be the victim of an overzealous prosecutor or even be falsely accused. That is where the ACLDN comes in. They provide immediate assistance when you need it most. If you find yourself under arrest, they immediately pay bail money and the retainer for your attorney. Additional funds are available for trial and civil proceedings. Beyond the money, they have far and away the best team in the industry, providing you invaluable information and training DVDs that are included with your membership, and who stand ready to work with your lawyer on your defense. People like Masad Ayub, John Farnham, James Fleming, Tom Givens, Emmanuel Capelson, Dennis Tueller, and led by network president Marty Hayes. Initial membership is only $135 for your first year, and you get 8 incredible training DVDs and other educational material when you join. If you don't have tens of thousands of dollars to defend yourself at your disposal right now, you need to be a member of the ACLDN. Go to armedcitizensnetwork.org and become a member today. And please mention that you heard about them on the Polite Society podcast.
And welcome back. This is the news segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. First up in our rundown of stories tonight, the SAF cheers Fifth Circuit victory in Vanderstock frame and receiver case. The Second Amendment Foundation is cheering a Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling in the case of Vanderstock versus Garland, challenging the authority of the Justice Department and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Every time I say that, I keep thinking convenience store, to regulate items that were not firearms as if they were firearms. SAF has intervened in the case, opposing the ATF's change in defining frames and receivers. The court today refused to stay portions of the rule SAF successfully challenged, pending appeal. Issues which SAF did not challenge when it intervened in the case were granted a stay. SAF and its partners in the intervention are represented by attorney Chad Flores. According to the Fifth Circuit panel, because the ATF has not demonstrated a strong likelihood of success on the merits, nor irreparable harm in the absence of a stay, we deny the government's request to stay the VACTOR of the 2 challenged portions of the rule. VACTOR reestablishes the status quo ante, means turns it back to the way it was, which was the world before the rule became effective. This effectively maintains, pending appeal, the status quo that existed for 54 years from 1968 to 2022. This is a quote from Adam Kraut. The court issued a ruling which declined to stay our successful challenge during this appeal, noted SAF Director Adam Kraut. As this case moves forward, we expect to gain and prevail on the portions of the final rule that we challenged. The court's finding the ATF had not demonstrated a strong likelihood of success on the merits bodes well for SAF and its members. This is a quote from Alan Gottlieb. We're delighted the court ruled in favor of our challenges to Biden's administrative overreach, and we will pursue the case to its ultimate conclusion. Guys, another win for SAF in federal court, this one again in the Fifth Circuit. John, you're up in show notes first. What do you think about this, man?
I think it's a great ruling to stop the ATF from just making up law. And I would actually say it goes back longer than 54 years. Instead of 1968, I would say before we became the United States, people could make their own firearms. And the government was not involved if you made it yourself. So, thank goodness for the Fifth Circuit.
All right. Rob, Charlie, you guys want in?
Yeah, I don't know if any of you have shot competition where you wear a gun out after a season. You know, you're replacing springs, you're replacing parts, you try different things. It's a bit like the joke about when is a wooden boat a different boat when you've replaced every part in it eventually? Well, as long as you retain the part with the serial number on it, you can do anything else you want. Meaning, this is an arbitrary rule invented by bureaucrats. I can't print it up.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's certainly not congressional. Charlie, what's your thoughts, man?
It's great to see that the ATF is getting struck down and this isn't going through, and it's going to be. I think it's going to be good to set precedents so other people cannot do the same thing, and the ATF can stop making their own rules and enforcing these made up laws that that only they know and understand.
Oh yeah, Rob does a great Southern sheriff, and I can in my head, Rob's voice is going right now saying, "You're pulling somebody over for a taillight, kicking the taillight. Boy, you ain't from around here, is you?" I can hear that right now with respect to the ATF. Legal today, not tomorrow.
Right.
One other thing about this ruling, it might slow down some of the states who are trying to outlaw ghost guns, which is a whole made-up thing.
Right.
I mean, frankly, I don't see how the states would have the authority, but they do. They seem to think that they do. But
yeah,
isn't that interesting when we see so many states pass laws that are just blatantly unconstitutional, and they're basically saying, "Fine, catch me in court.
we'll use your money to pay for the lawyer."
well, and I think that's it. I think they're throwing anything up against the wall, trying to find out what does stick and does make it past the Supreme Court. And my honest opinion is none of it will, but they're giving it the old college try.
Yeah, you know.
Paul, I want to take exception to that and look at it just from a different perspective. What if they expect all of it to fail, but it may take a decade to litigate? So they go, okay, we'll lose in a decade. It's all right. We'll add another law in 9 years, and you'll never catch us.
Yeah, I think they're sorely mistaken if they think it's going to take a decade to get back to the Supreme Court, especially with the current makeup of the Supreme Court. They seem to be, especially after Bruin, they seem to be, yeah, give us more. Give us more. We'll take it.
I hope you're right.
Charlie, any thoughts on this? And then we'll, because you were starting to go with something.
I know, and I forgot.
Ha! Lost his train of thought. Short train. I want to get a comment in here quick. Robert says, "Sorry I'm late. I have a note from my mom." Yeah.
It's Epstein's mom.
Yeah. Get a couple more. Yeah, let me get this one from C&T. Coop says, that's my dog shaking off the... got up behind me and is doing the shaking of the fur as you left the room, is what you heard. Anyway, C&T Designs and Arms Coop says the ATF is a tax enforcement agency that is completely unconstitutional. And going to the ghost gun thing, Robert says, in New Jersey, it's even illegal to download digital CAD files of firearms. Well, John, this goes to a free speech thing for me. Remember when this whole thing started with Defense Distributed? Somebody actually printed a book where and I had downloaded a copy. I don't have a printed copy, but it was for sale for quite a while on Amazon, where it was the ones and zeros that made up the code for printing a 3D firearm. And
Yep.
Guys, that's simply a free speech issue.
I have a copy of that somewhere. A hard copy.
Yeah. I want to say Aaron Paulette had one in Chicago at GRPC. So 2018?
Could very well be.
Yeah.
And I love this from C&T. The issue is, while these cases work their way through the courts, people are going to prison. And when these laws are struck down, they don't get their lives or their lost money back. That's a great point. And I don't have anything to counter that with.
what I find super frustrating is we have a revolving door of justice. Criminals come in, criminals go out, criminals come in, criminals go out. But if one of us had something that our state deemed illegal or that we shouldn't have, we're getting crucified. And I actually, I was on with Carrie Ann and Toby Leary from Cape Gun Works doing a video this weekend. And I said I was thinking about getting a bag of crack and making that part of my EDC so that if I ever get caught doing something I'm not supposed to do, I've got something to barter with. And of course, I say this facetiously, but that might have to be what we do, because they're going to treat people who have homemade firearms and whatever, people that are carrying in places they're not supposed to carry, they're going to treat them like hardened criminals, and the hardened criminals they're letting on the street and sending right out, giving them 18 months for raping young girls and kidnapping them. And the people that get caught with guns, they want to put them away for a long time.
I have an alternative for you, Charlie. Get Joe Biden to adopt you. Then you would be the president's son.
Oh, that'll be a good time. I think I'm past the adoption age, but it's not to say that there's not a price.
All right, Rob, do we want to talk about the NYPD?
If nothing else, to ridicule them, we certainly do. New York Police Department, remember, those were the guys who caused the Bruin case. They've been granting fewer firearms permits after the Supreme Court's ruling than they were before. Now, in New York, you need a permit to buy a firearm, to carry it, to keep it in your premises. They've issued fewer of those permits in 2023 than they did in 2022. That's from data obtained by the city. And it shows that despite the ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court, the city's not listening. In 2021, the New York PD, they are the one who vet firearms permits, received 4,663 applications and approved 2,500 of them, about 56%. That was under the stricter proper cause standards that the Supreme Court struck down. The standard required gun owners in New York to show, quote, proper cause in order to receive a permit to carry a weapon. The court said that licenses should be granted by default unless there was a specific reason to deny the application. Now, in 2022, the New York PD saw an increased number of applications. It increased up to 7,200, but approved just 1,500 of them, or 21%. Even though applications filed in the second half of the year no longer had to meet the proper cause standard, meaning they're giving the court the finger. Guys, what do you think about this?
I think somebody's going to have to sue them into compliance, somewhat similar to Charlotte, North Carolina. I want to say it's the Mecklenburg County Sheriff down there.
Yeah. Yep.
That has been sued multiple times and is still. The guy's going to have to be taken out of office, and I think we're going to have to. New York City is just another area where we're going to have to sue and sue and sue again to get them to come into compliance.
You know, statistically, in one sense, this does not make sense. You have had an increase of 3,000 permits, yet you have approved 1,000 less than the year before. You would have expected that you would have, if they were approving it at about a 50% rate, instead of 2,500 approved, you should have had somewhere in the neighborhood of 4,000 approved, and you didn't.
Yeah.
Rob?
There are remedies. We can look at the behavior of the city and say, hey, by the way, individual justices on the U.S. Supreme Court hear special pleadings from each of the federal districts, and you say, hey, remember you made a ruling specifically about this behavior. Court, the people in the city are ignoring you. How long are you going to do? Is it going to take another decade for you to issue another slap on the wrist? Well, the U.S. Supreme Court can appoint a special master that would take over firearms licensing in New York City. That's what they did in certain cities during school integration. There's precedence. I wonder what they'll do. Charlie, did you have something you wanted to say? You thought better of it?
I did. I always think better of what I'm going to say after I hear you talk, Rob.
Oh, listen to you.
All right, let's.
This is exactly what I was talking. Similar to what I was talking about. We have these people that are making the laws. We have these people that aren't obeying the laws. And if the people that are making the laws and who are, I don't want to say they're better than us, but they are our public servants. If they're not serving us, if they're not doing their job, then one, why are they around? Two, why are we listening to them? And why are we even paying attention to these fakakta laws?
Robert,
because they have guns and they'll put us in jail. I can't. It's not
or
worse
worse
with the consent of the governed. Go ahead.
Or to put you in jail, or worse. Robert says, I hear you need a permit to look at a picture of a gun online in New York City, and C&T Designs and Arms. We're getting more. I'm not going to get all these comments in, folks. Thank you for commenting, but I'm just my screen is scrolling. I'm just trying to catch what I can. These judges need to be impeached. Why are they allowed to sit on the bench and time after time make decisions that are unconstitutional? Let's see here. Robert says, problem with these lawsuits in blue states is the inferior court judges are activists that toe the gun grabber line and disregard SCOTUS.
He's right.
Yeah. And then he says, he follows that up with, you have to get up to the appeals level or even SCOTUS before you get relief. And that can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. To get to SCOTUS, that's not enough. You're talking a couple million.
And then you have to have them take it.
Yeah.
Right. $2.2 million is how much it cost NYSERPA to get the Bruin case to the Supreme Court.
Let me get one from Charlie Delano in. To get a permit in California, it's about $1,000, and they really don't want you to have it, but they allow looting to the point where stores just close up. Well, yeah, don't give the common man, who's most often the victim of crime, a permit. Don't give the common man anything they can do about it. Make the permit cost $1,000 annually, and then only the rich are going to be able to do it, and they don't get involved in crime. So, you know.
Have you noticed lately that anytime you go to a gun-related website, whether it's a forum, a manufacturer's website, they ask you, are you 18 or not? Or are you 21?
Yes.
And can we trace that back to California's law about
yes,
you can't encourage young people to look at guns?
Yeah.
But they can play, Call of Duty.
Let's face it, that's not a very rigorous security. I mean, this is like McLovin with the fake ID that he's holed up, he can't tell where he's looking.
Yeah.
Now, are you over 18? Yes.
It's just as secure as Pornhub. It's just as secure as OnlyFans. It's just as secure as any of those sites.
I wouldn't know.
We wouldn't know about that, Paul.
All right. John, save me, man. What's our next story?
Our next story deals with veterans' gun rights. Republican lawmakers on Tuesday accused Veterans Affairs leaders of depriving some veterans of their right to own firearms and promised changes in coming weeks. But Democrat critics say those proposed moves could end up leading to more suicides and self-harm among vulnerable veterans. At issue is legislation proposed by House Veterans Affairs Committee Chairman Mike Bost of Illinois. It's dubbed the Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act. The measure would block VA officials from sharing some information from the NICS check system, a federal database used to determine whether you can buy or not buy firearms. Boss said about 8,000 veterans were reported to the system last year, most for financial incompetence reasons and not criminal acts or specific mental health problems. But the VA could bar all of those veterans from purchasing weapons regardless of the underlying issues. The VA should not be able to, quote, the VA should not be able to take away a veteran's Second Amendment rights because they need help managing their benefits. Veterans should not be treated any differently than every other American citizen. Even criminals have to be convicted of a crime in a court of law before their names are reported to the system. Rob?
Yeah, this is closely related to cases working through the courts now where you have for example, misdemeanor conviction, or perhaps even simply a court order against you, and for some reason you lose your Second Amendment rights. You've never been tried and convicted of a crime. You've never been adjudicated mentally incompetent by medical professionals, nor have you been asked to bring countervailing evidence to say, well, you had your expert, do I get to provide mine? These Republican lawmakers are right. Will more vets commit suicide? Probably not, because it's really easy to get a gun. Will more of them commit suicide with a gun? Possibly, maybe not. John, what do you think?
Well, as many people on the podcast know, I used to be a financial planner before I retired. And all I've got to say is,
that's right.
If you're not being able to manage money was an issue, I know a lot of people who would have been denied their Second Amendment rights, not just veterans. I've heard plenty of horror stories. Or I've seen it.
Yeah, but are you a veteran, Charlie?
I'm not a veteran. I'm not. Although I on one of the road trips I took recently, I did drive a building that said veterinarian and taxidermist, and then in parentheses, either way, you're getting your animal back.
Okay. Yeah.
But Paul, I want to give a shout to CNT. I just checked Facebook. CNT, you didn't ping me yet. Send me a friend request. I can't find you.
I'm pretty sure he doesn't do Facebook. He's a YouTube guy. I've never
he's
seen
YouTube
him.
only. Okay.
I've never seen anything from him over on Facebook, but CNT, jump in the comments if you do have a Facebook and just haven't gotten to it.
No, I saw him on YouTube. I'll go ping him there.
Okay. All right. A lot of the people that have financial troubles with the military, they're not financial troubles at all. They're veterans who've come back. They've decided, look, I fought for this country. I'm going to buy an RV and I'm going to go explore this country with the benefits I have from serving with the military. And it's easier to do that if somebody back home handles the finances, pays the bills that today you're in Colorado, tomorrow you're in Wyoming, day after that you could be in wherever. Mail doesn't go that quickly, and so it's easy just to have somebody back home who you trust take care of it for you. That shouldn't cost you your Second Amendment rights.
Absolutely.
Let me get this one up here quick. One of the comments from CNT I can put on the air. He put up one that I wasn't going to touch, but mainly because he was going after me. I do very little on Facebook these days, he says. Robert also agrees, farce book. And I gotta say, I don't know if Facebook is screwing with my algorithm or not. I've gotten, and I wasn't kidding earlier, 63 comments in the 35 minutes we've been live, and there's no way I can get all those on the air, but I haven't got a single comment from the Facebook side yet. So if you're watching us on Facebook and you want to get a comment in, head over to YouTube. I get all those comments. So, Charlie, our next story is about Massachusetts. You wanna cover that one, man?
This is shocking, but there may be some good signs coming from the Bay State about the Lawful Citizens Imprisonment Act. It's far too early to celebrate, but there may be some encouraging signs for gun owners in Massachusetts when it comes to HD 4420. The nightmare gun control bill labeled the Lawful Citizens Imprisonment Act by the Gun Owners Action League. Earlier this week, bill sponsors Rep. Michael Day, and Democratic House leaders held 2 days' worth of closed-door meetings with their colleagues as they stumped for the bill in the hopes of holding quick votes in both the House and in the Senate. But it's heading into the weekend, and multiple media outlets in Boston have been reporting that the legislation is stalled, at least for the time being. So from what I've heard, the Rep. Day took a 141-page bill that got rid of anything that might have been not bad in Massachusetts and turned it into something horrible. And his summary of the 141-page bill was 3 pages long. So I've heard from what I understand, it seems like he's being less than truthful with everything that's in the bill, because when he originally came out and started talking about this at the gun law listening tours, he would say that they just wanted to go after ghost guns and they wanted to do live fire training, and the bill goes way past all of that. So it's I've heard that the Gun Owners Action League has gotten about 1,000 new members in the past week, which is wonderful, and people need to keep calling their politicians. The 2 classes that I taught this past weekend, I spent more time than I should have telling these people they need to write their politicians and what was in this bill and how difficult it was going to become if this becomes law.
Charlie, if this law goes into effect, obviously it's hitting lawful gun owners. How does it impact minority communities? Can that be used to stop the bill?
I don't think they really care, honestly. I don't think they're concerned about the minorities because they're one of the stops on the gun law listening tour, more than one actually, were in some of the crappier towns in Boston or in Massachusetts, and they were saying, hey, these people are immigrants and the parents have to work a lot, so they're not able to spend time with their kids, their 9, 10, 12-year-old, 15, 16-year-old kids, and the kids end up getting involved in gangs. And that doesn't have anything to do with anything. These people are getting guns illegally somehow, somewhere, through stealing them or buying them out of state or whatever. They're getting them here. They're getting them to people that aren't supposed to have them. So I can't imagine it's certainly not going to have a positive impact. And what it is going to do with the live fire training, with having to learn de-escalation, and with taking brand new shooters and putting them in active shooter drills, is going to make it completely unaffordable for anyone in that doesn't have an incredible amount of money to spend on training. It's going to make it impossible for them to get a license, and they're not going to be able to exercise their Second Amendment right lawfully, and that's probably going to lead to more people getting guns illegally and lead to more crime.
Yeah, logic makes sense to me.
Yeah, it really does.
I want to get a couple comments in here. We've now got a side discussion going on online about the Facebook comments. Robert says They're probably sending it to New Jersey to try out first. Speaking of the Facebook comments. And Michael he was in a Facebook group, and I do send this to a couple groups. I think that's why it doesn't show his name. It shows ReStreamBot. I'm sending you a test comment. Did you get this? Yes! Yes, I did. Apparently we're live on Facebook, and some comments are getting to me at least. So, let's just hope that going back to the story we were just talking about, let's just hope that abomination of a bill stays delayed. Although there seems to have been thought this past weekend when we talked about it on the weekend edition of the Bullet that it might just be that the House and Senate are fighting over who gets to push it forward first so that they get the credit for it.
Yeah, and one person I talked with last week said they want to get this done by July 31st so that it can go into effect on August, or sorry, that they have it done when they go to their recess at the beginning of August.
Yeah, I want a job where I go to recess for 6 months a year. Just saying. And get paid for it.
Kidding.
Let me get one in. Go ahead, Charlie.
I was going to say, if this goes through, they're obviously going to go back to their towns for their summer break and say, hey, look at what we've done. We've done this to end gun crime and all this nonsense. All it really does is come down on the lawful gun owners.
Charlie, I hate to say this, there are enough gun owners that if they spoke up, they could stop it.
Yes. So from what I understand, like I did the math on this. I had to use a calculator, okay? But there's 600, right? It was on my phone. Let's come on. But,
but still, good for you.
Right. I know. I can push the numbers. There's, from what I understand, there are 600,000 licensed gun owners in Massachusetts. If all of them spent $30 a year to join the Gun Owners Action League, that would give the Gun Owners Action League $18 million in their coffers, which, not that we want to get this to the Supreme Court, but we would be able to handle it much easier if it did get to the Supreme Court. One of the things that I've been ranting about, not online, is that there were a small core of people that were going to these that were the gun owners. There were some people that went on their own, and as gun owners, we like to do things on our own. We don't like to be told what to do. We don't want to join a group if we don't have to. So gun owners would show up, and honestly, most of the people that spoke out were gun owners, and they were speaking out in opposition of all of this. There were some red shirts that were there, and there were probably the same dozen or so people, and whatever, 6 out of the 12, and then another time there's 5 out of 12 or whatever. But it was about the same people that showed up every time on the Moms Demand Action, and they just kept saying the same things over and over. We want live fire training. We don't want to take your gun rights away, but I want to know that you can hit your target if you're carrying a gun in the mall. And all of the people that I see bickering online about this were nowhere to be seen at any of the gun law listening tours. And now that this has gotten to the point where it's a bill and some politicians are getting on board with it, they're like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And part of me wants to say, where have you been since January when all of this started?
They didn't want to be on a list.
I get it. I don't want to be on a list.
But we are already on a list.
I tell you what, stay anonymous and lose your rights. I'm good with that. Because, you know what? You have to show up and be present to win. You weren't. CNT?
Yeah, CNT says a lot of gun owners don't want to get political, also known as they want to stay asleep and lose their rights. And I want to get this one up here real quick. Where was it? 2 of them I want to get. He also said, Rob, I remembered my Facebook password and messaged you on self-defense gun stories. So there you go.
Thank you.
MK on the YouTube side says, Mexico is urging the U.S. court to revive the $10 billion lawsuit against gun makers. And I have a sneaking suspicion MK is also Michael on the Facebook side, who says Mexico urges U.S. court to revive $10 billion lawsuit against gun makers. So, where are we at here?
Originally, that case came from the Brady campaign and their chief lawyer. Then the Brady campaign says, we don't want to file under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. So they said, nah. And Lowy left and started his own group and now is listed as a foreign agent for the Mexican government.
See.
Charlie on the YouTube side says, I'm probably on a few lists. Look, I will guarantee you this, I'm on a lot of lists. And I kind of look for new lists to get on all the time. More lists, the better. Eventually, if I'm on so many lists, somebody's going to get scared of me.
If we're all on a list, they can't come after all of us.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go to what they said in The Incredibles, and if everybody's on a list, then nobody's on a list, right? If everyone's special, then no one's special.
There you go. There you go. John, let's talk about that Glock 7, shall we?
Oh, yeah. Back in 1988, Congress passed a bill banning undetectable firearms. The Undetectable Firearms Act was a response to Glock releasing a polymer pistol. Of course, we know it was not undetectable. Now the Undetectable Firearms Act is back and might be up for reauthorization, hidden in the National Defense Authorization Act. In other words, the funding for the Department of Defense. When the first when Glock released their first polymer gun, anti-gun groups started to spread the propaganda about Glocks not being detectable by medical detectors. Even Hollywood got involved and said, in the movie Die Hard 2, where John McClane said that terrorist groups were using Glock 7s and they could sneak by airport metal detectors. We know that's not true. The bill would demand a minimum amount of metal in firearms. It was supposed to have sunsetted in 2013, but it got reauthorized. In 2013, no guns came close to being undetectable. Now they're again trying to sneak it in to the National Defense Authorization Act bill number. And this time Congress is trying for a permanent reauthorization. We know that technology has increased greatly since 2013, such as 3D printing. Some of the most innovative firearms designers have come from the 3D printing community. Young adults at home with 3D printers can be purchased for as low as $99, and they're turning out amazing designs. So virtually anyone can be a firearm designer. That said, barrels still are metal. They're still not undetectable. And so some Republicans are working behind the scenes to get the bills, Senator Jack Reed, a Democrat from Rhode Island, is working with Republicans, rhinos, behind the scenes in the Senate to get the bill's reauthorization attached to NDAA. And it looks like it might have some bipartisan support. Chuck Schumer is calling for a vote on cloture, stopping debate, for Monday night at 5:30 Eastern Daylight Time, so it might have already happened. They would limit debate to 30 hours. The House could vote on the amendment. Since the National Defense Authorization Act passed by the Senate conflicts with the House version, they're going to have to hold a conference committee to work out the differences, and they could still slide it through.
Yeah.
Charlie?
Charlie, go. Yeah, Charlie, go.
I just want to say that the only undetectable firearm I remember seeing in a movie was In the Line of Fire with Clint Eastwood, where John Malkovich made a plastic gun so that he could assassinate a president, and he brought the ammunition in on a keychain in Bunny Lucky Rabbit's foot, and that's the only time we've seen it. seen an undetectable firearm. As John said, the barrels are still made of steel. The slides are still made of steel. So this stuff isn't practical. And I get that In the Line of Fire is just a movie, but stuff's just not practical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
It's not practical.
I mean, you look at the really high-end barrels, which are carbon fiber barrels. They still have a metal lining. It's not, you're not firing the cartridge or the bullet through a carbon fiber barrel itself. It's just carbon fiber around the metal.
I used to play with magnetometers to find different sorts of metals. I used to play with different X-ray devices. I sold equipment to Customs and Border Patrol to help them find contraband. When you say it's undetectable gun, that depends on how you look. If you're willing to X-ray it, you can find it. You can invent something that you could call a gun. Maybe out in science fiction land, very limited range, very limited power, one shot, two shot. So at what point is it not a gun because it barely works?
Yeah. Robert says, don't confuse them with facts.
There you go. Thanks, Robert.
And Coop over at CT Designs of Arms, Coop says, the only people with undetectable firearms are government agents that are doing really dirty things. Well, and I don't imagine many of those are going to be doing going through a metal detector anyway. So I don't think they need, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Yeah, that doesn't work. And the government is really good at looking the other way when the government is doing something wrong. So
this is true.
All right. I think it's my turn. I'm going to go ahead and take this next one. And this one, over 96% of firearms-related deaths of children and teens are intentional. The story comes off Ammo Land. Over 96% of firearms-related deaths of children and teens are intentional. Much has been written about the number of children and teens, people under the age of 20, teens, people who are under the age of 20, except when they go up to 20 years, 364 days, who are killed in incidents involving firearms and are being more significant than the number of people under 20 who are killed in incidents involving motor vehicles. The writer says this is a ridiculous comparison. It's meant to elicit an emotional response. Nearly all incidents involving motor vehicles are unintentional deaths. There may be a few homicides and suicides, but the vast majority of vehicle deaths are accidents. Nearly all the incidents involving firearms are intentional. Murder, gang violence, or black-on-black crime. There are some accidents, but the vast majority, the writer says, are homicides. People are choosing to kill children and teens with firearms or choosing to kill themselves with firearms. Here come the hard, fast stats. In 2019, there were 96.4% of those killed with firearms were intentional. In 2020, 96.5% were intentional. In 2019, 61% of deaths where the intent was known, homicide, suicide, or accident, were homicides. Suicides were 35%. In 2020, homicides were 66%, suicides were 30%. By contrast, fatal firearm accidents for all ages dropped more than 94% from 1933 to 2017. Those small number of incidents cited are caused mainly by irresponsible adults, and nearly all firearm fatalities happen because someone decides to commit a crime, killing someone or themselves. Guys, I get almost every day, I'll get in one of my news feeds, 2-year-old kills brother, 2-year-old or 3-year-old shoots. Yeah, does it happen that there are unintentional firearms deaths because of irresponsible parents that leave a loaded firearm around kids? It does happen. It's a tragedy every time it happens. But guys, I'm here to say it's actually on a nationwide level very rare.
Paul, let's talk about that. There are lots of criminals in our inner cities. Some of them, though, may be possessory criminals. Oh, I didn't get a license and therefore I have a conviction. Okay, so are they violent criminals? We don't know. But for whatever reason, they're no longer legally allowed to have a firearm. It's not like they are then going to walk around with a gun safe to safely store their gun, because that's incriminating. Do these guys then stuff it under the stairs in the front of the house when they go visit mom? Yes. Do they stuff it between the couch cushions at their girlfriends? Yes. So some of this is negligent, I understand. Some of that is because we've made it illegal for such a large population to do the right thing and take proper care of a gun.
And even at that, Rob, I'm still saying it's incredibly rare.
Yes, but we could make it even more rare if these cities let people obey the law.
Yeah. All right, let me look over. John or Charlie, you want to chime in real quick?
I'm good.
I think it says everything.
Okay. I want to get two comments in here. First, by Coop over at CNT. You need an all-plastic gun that shoots projectile made out of ice. And Dana replied to that. He said, didn't Mythbusters try the ice bullet? Dana, you're right. They did. It don't work. So,
yeah, they couldn't find it, right? Like they figure it melted and dissipated, and
yeah, and didn't penetrate anyway. Not like a real. Guys, let's go ahead, and I want to skip to the last story simply because it's all full of Schadenfreude, and then we're going to go to our break. Amalgamated Financial calls itself America's socially responsible bank, and those of you that are frequent listeners to the show or frequent viewers of the show know we've talked about Amalgamated Bank before. They're the ones that were pushing so hard to get a special merchant category code for firearms purchases. Well, the story says they're in trouble. Its biggest shareholder is a labor union, and its customers include nonprofits, unions, and political campaigns. It classifies about half its deposits as super core because they come from customers who've been with the bank for an average of 17 years. The New York-based bank stands out for other reasons. U.S. lenders have seen the market values of their assets hit harder by rising interest rates, and most of its deposits weren't covered by federal deposit insurance. The unrealized losses don't put Amalgamated under financial stress as long as it continues holding the assets and doesn't have to sell at a loss. Loan defaults haven't been a problem for the bank, and deposits have held steady, yet its stock price is down 26% this year, in line with the declines at all other small banks. And one other thing I got from a story is, guess what presidential campaign has almost all of their funds at Amalgamated Bank? I've never in my life rooted for a bank to fail. Never before. I am now. John, what do you think, man? You're the money guy to start with.
Well, we know it's the Biden-Harris campaign, but it's never smart to put all your eggs in one basket. Risk management tells you to spread it around. And from what I can gather, what the bank did is they invested in stuff that did not keep up with inflation. They had to raise rates because people are demanding a higher return on their money. And if you have it in long-term, low-interest rate U.S. government bonds, you're not making the money to pay what you're offering your depositors. Life is tough. It's what happened to Silicon Valley Bank.
Yeah. I'm not a banker, and I'm right there with Charlie. I'm one that doesn't manage money very well. From reading this story and from John's comments, all I got to say is, you pays your money, you take your choice. If you put your money where they go after social justice first, don't be surprised when social justice doesn't make them any money.
Mm-hmm.
And this is interesting. Robert posts up in comments, because they're too big to fail. John, they're not the size of what was Lehman Marcus or Neiman. No, doggone, what was the name of that?
Lehman Brothers.
Lehman Brothers, yes. They're not that size.
No. No, not at all. And what the problem is, if you buy a bond and the interest rate was 2%, and now the going interest rate is 3%, you're not going to pay $1,000 for it. You're going to say, if you want me to buy your 2% bond, you've got to pay me, if you want me to buy it, I'm going to only give you $900, not $1,000. And so they've been losing money that way.
Who would have thought? Oh, right. Paul, you're muted. Oh, you knew that. Okay, on to a commercial and then DGUs?
Yeah, I think so. Let's go ahead, and we're going to take our and I'm just going to say this now, we're going to take our final break. We're going to combine the DGU segment and the What We're Doing in Media segment into one segment, as we've done a few times lately. We're going to take our final break right now. We're going to hear from the Complete Combatant. When we come back, we'll get to our DGUs, 2 of them out of East New Jersey. We'll be right back right after this.
This portion of the Polite Society podcast is brought to you by the Complete Combatant. The Complete Combatant is designed for a broad base of citizens that range from students that don't own a gun on up to advanced students that train often. The Complete Combatant offers several different courses that build upon each other, from avoidance, using verbal commands, and preparing for contact, lethal versus non-lethal decisions, your 911 call, interacting with the police, to even dealing with the legal system in the aftermath. The Complete Combatant courses are a layered approach for all levels of experience that will walk you through all the many stages of decisions while developing a game plan tailored to your skills and your everyday carry. Please visit www.thecompletecombatant.com and make sure you mention this ad to receive 15% off. Again, that's www.thecompletecombatant.com and mention the ad for 15% off.
All right, we're back. This is the Defensive Gun Use segment of the Polite Society podcast, presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. As I say every week, these discussions are not legal advice. Some of us are trainers, but this is not formal training, and you need formal training. The Defensive Gun Use segment is intended as information and education only, not as training. As always, the opinions of the hosts are only their own opinions and not those of any sponsors or other affiliations, although they should be. And before we get into defensive gun uses, I got to get one comment in from the last segment. Robert Poserina says, too big means they contribute in large amounts to political parties. That's what's too big to fail.
Yeah, that's code. That's what they call a tell, right?
Yes. All right. Charlie, man, you've got our first DGU out of San Antonio. You want to tell us about it?
All right. So from San Antonio, what have we heard about the all-night convenience stores called? We've called them Stomp and Robs. After midnight, a suspect approached the register at a San Antonio 7-Eleven and demanded money. He was holding a gun and menaced the cashier with it. The 28-year-old cashier responded, like many of us would, and pulled his own firearm out and started shooting. The press says they were blindly shooting. The robber decided that this is not where he wanted to be and exited the store. Probably a good decision. The cashier believed the suspect may have been wounded. Local police secured the area with a helicopter and canine units, but had not found the criminal. A 34-year-old customer was grazed by the bullet and received care on site. No word if the cashier is still employed or not. And in a similar story, in June of this year, a 72-year-old female cashier filed a lawsuit against Circle K after she was wrongfully terminated for exercising her right to self-defense. In the October 2020 robbery, she refused to comply with the knife-wielding robber who demanded cigarettes. When she refused, he went behind the counter and she held her hands out to maintain a distance between them. The robbery and her subsequent firing for defending herself left her fearing for her job security, panics while at work, and worried about being terminated at any time. She also makes less money and has fewer benefits than she previously had. The lawsuit seeks damages for emotional pain and suffering, inconvenience, mental anguish, and loss of employment of life. They're also hoping the suit would encourage companies to change their policies around how employees should handle potential dangerous situations on the job. Quote, I think there has been more nuance in the policies around the industry that penalize employees for engaging with their would-be assailants, said Iris Halpin, who represents the clerk. Quote, the employees have a right to self-defense. They have victims' rights. That doesn't change when they're in the workplace. End quote.
I'm gonna jump in on this one first. I'm of two minds about this. Working at a convenience store and working at a Circle K, which is a convenience store. Let's just say these are not the highest paying jobs in the world. And too often people are fired if they do anything to prevent themselves from being killed when there's a robbery. I'm kind of two minds. Part of me says, look, if I were in that position, I was looking for a job when I found this one. I'm not going to give my life for your company. Part of me says, maybe I want to try and get some education and go on to a job where I'm not being put in this position. I don't think there's a hard and fast great rule for it, other than I hope that some of these lawsuits actually pan out and these companies are held to task. John, you got something up in show notes.
Yeah, I mean, with regard to the 72-year-old being fired for holding her hands out to maintain space between her and the robber in a defensive manner is utterly and completely ridiculous. I don't know. It's just ridiculous. She didn't try to knife him. She didn't try to shoot him. She didn't try to club him. She just wanted him to keep away from her. I hope Circle K is sued a lot. Now, with regard to the 7-Eleven clerk who wounded a customer, you got to remember every bullet has an attorney on it.
Well,
be sure of your target and what lies beyond it.
Yes. Do we know whether it was the clerk or the bad guy that wounded the customer?
No. Not when I read the story.
Yeah.
Okay, here's some takeaway for our listeners. I want you to be able to hit your target within 10 yards. Go practice until you can. Also, I want you to know where you can shoot and can't shoot in environments that you're in all the time. You're behind the counter? Awesome. There's a big glass wall in front of you. You can't shoot there because that glass isn't a backstop. Charlie, what do you think about that?
So I spent a summer as an armed truck driver a long time ago. Before I had a gun license and I didn't have any guns. That's how long ago it was. And the company policy was if somebody robbed you, you give them the money just so you don't get killed. And literally there were days when I'm like, how come I don't rob this guy myself? You know what I mean? Like, if they just give me the money, I leave the truck, I have a friend come pick me up, and we're done. Like, I'm all set. I got a bag with $1 million in it, and I'm good to go. So I get that companies don't have policies where they're not going to allow you to protect yourself. But to fire someone for that, I would quit the job before they were able to fire me, because I'm like, hey, this job is a danger to my health. I need out. I'm going to quit. It's not worth the $15, $16, $17 you're getting paid.
Yeah.
Right.
Warsaw Patriots chiming in. He says, so I guess theft is legal these days? Well, Warsaw Patriot, I guess you don't live in San Francisco. Yeah, in San Francisco,
it's not legal. It's
is.
Just like drugs. It's not prosecuted.
Yeah. Rob, you want to take Philadelphia, number one?
Don't tempt me, because I'll tell you where we can put it. Despite what some on the left would like to claim, there is a physical strength difference between men and women. Men are generally stronger, and for that reason, women should be able to use the tools to defend themselves. After 1 a.m, a woman arrived at her apartment in the Georgetown section of Philadelphia. She found 4 unknown men inside. They were there without permission, but the story didn't say if there was a forced entry. A confrontation was inevitable. Luckily for her, she was practicing some form of pogo. She opened fire on her unwelcomed invaders. When Philadelphia police arrived, they found her standing on Germantown Avenue near one of the suspects. Her attacker was injured and lying on the ground. The first 48-year-old suspect was shot in the right leg and arm. A second 45-year-old man was found on a different street with a gunshot wound to the back. Both have been charged with burglary. No word on their fellow criminals. What would you guys tell your students?
Good on her for pants on, gun on, or it could be purse carry. I mean, good on her for having her firearm on her and readily available. The story says that confrontation was unavoidable. I'm going to say if there was forced entry into the home and it was obvious the confrontation was avoidable, you back off, you call the police, you let them clear the house.
Absolutely.
Paul, will they come?
That's a great question.
If the answer is eventually.
Next week, we've got an opening between the hours of? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If she saw
when are we getting to the point where, and I'm sorry, I've got to make fun of this. Rob, you just popped this into my head. Are we getting to the point where police responding to a crime, or like the cable company, will be there between the hours of 2 p.m. and 3 a.m.?
Yeah.
Right.
Charlie, there was something you wanted to say about this.
Oh, I know what sorry, I lost my train and then it came back. If she saw that somebody broke into her house, it could have been unavoidable just by leaving and getting out of there and waiting and, like you said, leaving and calling the police. If something, if your door's open and you didn't leave the door open, it's a good time to hold off and see if anything looks weird, or call for people, see if anyone's in the house, see if anything looks strange or out of place.
Yep.
I want to offer up a comment here. Is there anybody else who finds close quarters combat both terrifying and thrilling?
Yes. having been in simulated, well, I was the opposite direction of Rob. I was in an active shooter interdiction course It was 5 years ago this week I was in that course, and part of that was force on force, and I was the good guy going in, and it is absolutely terrifying, and it is one of the most fun things I've ever done, and I learned an absolute ton out of it, and I got killed twice. So,
and like Lazarus, you're here.
Here I am.
It's I've only done one. I've done a couple force on force classes, and it's exhilarating. It really is. Like, it gets the blood pumping and flowing, and you're like, "Oh my God, this is great! This is such a rush."
It also causes the swear words to come out, right?
Yes, it does. Only the worst ones, as loud as you can say them.
That's a story for off the air. I've heard the story before. That nothing we can put out on the air. But you know what? Come to Gun Rights Policy Conference at AmCon the end of September. Track down Charlie Cook and have him tell you the story about force on force.
Absolutely. It's much more fun over a drink.
All right. John, why don't you take Philadelphia number 2?
Alrighty. Let's just stay in the city of brotherly love. A 21-year-old pizza delivery driver had just dropped off food at an apartment complex right around midnight. Two masked men with guns forced him back into his vehicle. The driver was eventually able to get out of the car, and one of the carjackers pursued him. The driver was able to pull his firearm out, and a shootout ensued. Chief Inspector Scott Small said, and that perp was shot in the lower back. The second suspect left the area and is still on the run. Fortunately, the delivery driver was not injured and was licensed to carry. Charles Brown from the Mount Airy neighborhood said, "What did they say? You do stupid stuff, you get stupid prizes." Action News talked to a man who works with the driver and was actually on the phone with him during the robbery. The guy didn't want to go on camera, but he said he could hear the driver pleading with the robbers not to shoot him. It is unclear if either of the suspects fired a shot, but police say they were looking for a weapon that may have been thrown somewhere last night. They also stated the driver is not going to face any charges.
Given the Philly DA, that's saying something.
Yes.
Yeah. I think Krasner was the very first Soros DA.
If only we'd learned lessons faster.
Yes. Absolutely. Well, that's going to do it for our defensive gun use segment. I'm just going to go ahead and jump right forward. We're not going to subject you to another commercial break. I'm going to say, Rob, what's been going on over at SlowFax lately?
I've been writing about the faster class that I took in Colorado. Some of the problems that these school defenders wrestle with, it's advanced material. It's beyond what most of us have to consider. On the other hand, some of their concerns are exactly the same. They're the same as what we face whether we own a gun or not. Everybody wonders what to do. Should I try and escape? Should I defend where I am? Or should I advance? I talk about that in an article entitled, Should We Stay or Should We Go? Who Should Stop Evil? That's at slowfax.wordpress.com. My articles are picked up at Clash Daily. John, what's been keeping you so busy at your blog?
When it comes to anti-gunners in the media, but I repeat myself, you just have to laugh. I love memes because they're great for conveying a message. Despite the education establishment, the media, and the entertainment industry constantly saying guns are bad, they believe we are the ones who are brainwashed, not them. And that might explain why KCAL TV out of Los Angeles had a story about police recovering assault revolvers with high-capacity magazines. Say what? I also have a post up about the worshipful Worshipful Company of Gunmakers. They are a British guild for gunmakers who received a royal charter in 1634. They are also charged by the UK government with running the London Proof House, which inspects and certifies the safety of firearms. That and more is at onlygunsandmoney.com. Charlie, you've been active.
I'm just trying to keep up. Tomorrow, I've got a Riding Shotgun coming out with Mike Jeremita, who is a U.S. law shield in Pennsylvania. He's got a book that's called Pennsylvania Gun Law, Armed and Educated, and he has a YouTube channel and radio show called Mike G in the Morning. So the show is coming out tomorrow on YouTube and in podcast form. The Armed Lifestyle magazine issue with the Writing Shotgun with Charlie and my interview with Hickok 45 is out. It's been out for a couple of weeks, and I've got an article called When the Man Comes Around on News 2A about when the police here in Massachusetts, there are 3 towns where the police are speaking out against this HD 4420 because it affects them when they are off duty. So it's nice to finally have them speaking up and out about some anti-gun nonsense. Paul.
Well, as I said, ever since Friday afternoon, my entire existence has revolved around getting ready for Gun Rights Policy Conference and AMCON, and that did not change today, will not change tonight. I am getting ready for it, and I want everybody to please pay attention. We've got regular broadcasts of the Bullet coming up tomorrow and Wednesday. Thursday, there is no broadcast. Friday, there is no broadcast, although I may get something up Friday night. Saturday is Rick Ector's thing in Detroit. Both Rob and I are going to be there. There is going to be a Saturday night broadcast to whoever I can convince to come up to my room after everything is shut down, and we're going to try to do an in-person Bullet broadcast and see if we can get some people to talk about the news of the week. But I also expect to have interviews with instructors that are there. I expect to have interviews with ladies who are going through it, both first-time and returning ladies. I'm going to have a lot of content coming out. It's just I can't put it on a schedule where it's going to be releasing at 7 p.m. Central Time Zone, the only time zone that matters. So just keep your eyes out, and a lot of stuff's going to be coming up, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then Monday of next week, no Polite Society. I'll still be on my way back from Detroit. So that's kind of what's going on with me. All right. I think that's going to wrap up another episode of the Second Amendment Foundation's Polite Society podcast. So for Dana, John, Susan, Amanda, Robin, Charlie, Carrie Ann, and Rob,
until next time,
stay safe.
Be aware.
And we'll see you down the road.
The views and opinions on the show you just heard are those of the host and the guest and are not necessarily the views of any sponsors or other affiliations. But hey, not everyone is as smart as we are.
Okay, we are clear of the recording. We're still live. We're going to go ahead and shut the streams down here in just a second. Lots of comments, even comments still coming in. I apologize to everybody who commented, and I did not get their comment on the air. There's just so many of them, I couldn't get them all up. Guys, anything we want to say before I do go ahead and shut the stream down?
If you're in Detroit, please say hi.
Yes. Yes, please come by and find either Rob or I. Charlie won't be around because, we're not that important for him. But please do stop by and say hi to Rob and I.
I got to say, I am glad when this weekend will be over, because in 2 weeks it's all going to start all over for next year.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's and it'll start, because we got the next thing coming up is Gun Rights Policy Conference, and I can give anybody, John, who's not going to be there, a little bit of crap about not being there. Although John's been to every single one I've been to, so I think we can give him a little bit of a break this year. So anyway,
I paid my tribute.
We are going to shut the broadcast down. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you for commenting, and we'll see you next time.